Thank you very much. My name is Rosie Blau. I'm editor of 1843, sister magazine to The Economist, where we publish long-form pieces about our world, our lives, and the forces that shape it. But my task today is not to tell you about 1843, but 2020, and I can't promise to be entirely positive. I'm supposed to tell you in a few minutes what the next year might hold for the world, and I'm afraid I always think that if I could really do that with any great accuracy, I'd be making far more money than I am now. But anyway, I had a look at what I said last year, and at least some of it, what I said, came true. So I'm going to give it a go again at lightning speed. 10 trends to expect in the year ahead. I'm going to start close to home and move outwards. So I'm afraid that means I have to start with Brexit. And the question that I heard some people utter last Friday, which was, has it actually happened or not? Well, the answer, of course, is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we are now definitely leaving the EU. But no, in the sense that very little has changed except for a few new 50-pence pieces. And the Brexit monster is certainly not going to go away this year, because the negotiations over what kind of deal we're leaving with at the end of the year have yet to be done. So get Brexit done, the clever slogan that Boris Johnson won the election with, is a myth, and so is the idea of a clean break. And as we've already seen, the divorce negotiations have got pretty nasty. So on a personal level, I think we can all expect to continue to be extremely bored by the whole thing in 2020. The future price of balsamic vinegar, Comté cheese and Merlot remains uncertain. From a business point of view, I'm afraid it's even worse, because there will be more wrangling, more cliff edges to come in 2020, and of course that means far more uncertainty. The risk of a no-deal Brexit hasn't gone away, and we still don't know if we'll end up on amicable terms after our divorce, or, if seems possible given the current tone of discussion, we're going to be one of those couples who can barely be civil to each other even in front of the children. And because of all of this, let's not forget that the UK and other countries in the EU will continue to find ourselves distracted and sidetracked from solving far more pressing problems at home and abroad. Talking of pressing problems at home brings me to theme number 2, season 2 of The Trump Show. Now, I know we don't know it for sure, but that's the prediction. Now, of course, I'm talking about an election that won't happen until November, and indeed a term of office that won't start until 2021. But we all know that the Trump Show, or the preparations for the next season, are going to dominate the next year. The tone set by Trump in the last election campaign in 2016 has only become more pronounced. There'll be increasing polarization and increasing vitriol on both sides. American politics will be unavoidable in 2020. But underlying that campaign and everything that we hear about on the news in America is something that will be an even bigger trend happening in the world that you won't necessarily hear mentioned on the news, or at least not directly. But it underpins a huge amount of what's going on in the world. And this is the subplot of The Trump Show, which may one day come to be seen as the real plot. Because the biggest thing happening in the world at the moment is that America is defying, changing, indeed dismantling the post-war rules-based international order. You can name pretty much any international organization, the UN, NATO, WTO, the Paris Treaty, TPP, NAFTA, the Iran nuclear deal. All of these are being changed by the Trump administration, as well, of course, as the trade war on a number of fronts. So we face disruption and we face the spectre of recession. Now, normally economic expansions are killed off by rising interest rates or financial crashes, which lead to a fall in demand. This recession, if it comes, could primarily be about supply and the erecting of trade barriers. So we face the possibility of a global downturn of an unusual sort with ramifications for us all. But the changes in international relations don't stop there. In simple terms, Trump thinks the rest of the world has been taking advantage of America in trade, defense, and so on. And this is one of the most popular aspects of Trump's policies that are likely to find echoes even among Democrat candidates. All of which is a very long way of saying expect more uncertainty in 2020 in global affairs and the international economy, and their unexpected knock-on for us all. Don't worry, it's going to improve in a minute. Number 3, I'm afraid, is disease, or more specifically, coronavirus. Now, for me, it's always a sign of a news story that's caught the popular imagination when my children know about it. And though they're both at primary school, they definitely know about coronavirus. So, will this turn out to be the story of 2020? Or is it going to be something that we look back on in a couple of months and laugh at how scared we were? Obviously, we hope we'll be able to laugh at ourselves, but it's pretty worrying. There are some signs, however, that it could die down or at least peter out and not be quite such a substantial problem as we think. Given the long incubation period, it's very likely that we will get a lot more cases in the next 2 weeks across the world. However, so far, the mortality of coronavirus is not that high. And though more people will die of the disease, the chances are that the share of people dying from this will actually turn out to be hopefully less lethal than seasonal flu. That doesn't make it not worrying. It is worrying, but it may be that it's not as bad as we think. However, given how much we still don't know, it's likely to be a very scary few weeks and possibly few months. And even if this virus does soon peter out, the economic effect may be felt around the world for some months. China accounts for 1/5 of global output, so there's very likely to be a dent in global growth, whatever happens. Okay, I can tell that some of you are feeling depressed, so it's not all bad. Trend number 4 is tech. We're going to keep talking about astonishing, impressive, and some frightening new advances in the tech world. Some of this is going to be really cool tech. We're going to hear about flying taxis this year, about electric supercars, and personalized medicine. We're also going to have more techlash, with tech giants bracing themselves for more regulation, tax, and critical scrutiny. There'll be questions about particular platforms, and Instagram is likely to be one of these, which I think is important to many people in this room. Luxury brands for whom Instagram is a useful and important way of disseminating their brand. For brands and consumers, there will also be questions about how we use data, which is likely to have a knock-on effect in how we market our goods and how we find new markets. Okay. Trend number 5, let's move on to jollier things. 2020 will be a bumper year for sport and culture. At the Olympics in Tokyo, we'll get skateboarding, rock climbing, karate, and surfing as new sports. Baseball and softball are returning, having been absent from the 2012 and 2016 Games. And this is all part of an effort to broaden the appeal of the Games, particularly for young people. In addition, we'll have new museums supposed to open in Hong Kong and Cairo, both of which are likely to provoke debate about art and politics. In April, we have a new James Bond film, No Time to Die. 250 years since the birth of Beethoven, so expect many odes to joy. And it'll be 500 years since the death of Raphael. Now, these events are, of course, important sporting and cultural moments in their own right, but they're also a chance for brands to try and associate themselves with feel-good and generally positive things. Which brings me to point number 6, which is that brands will need positive associations in 2020, associations which a broad range of people will sign up to, because in other spheres there's likely to continue to be a growing politicization of brands. Now, we saw that last year. In Hong Kong, there are unofficial maps of which retail and food outlets are pro-Beijing and which are pro-protester. We saw it in the US with NFL players kneeling in protest at Trump's policies. We've seen it in the UK with companies declaring themselves for or anti-Brexit. This trend will run and run. It's partly because society is becoming more polarised, but it's also partly a backlash on the part of consumers who will grow increasingly sceptical and questioning about the idea of brand purpose, the idea that we are all answering some higher calling or mission in our selling. In other words, in 2020, there will be growing pressure on brands to have stories to tell, but consumers are growing far more savvy about which of those stories are real. Which leads clearly on to the 7th trend, climate change, sustainability, and the environment. In 2020, we can expect a continued lack of action on the part of governments about climate change, but growing anger about this on the part of individuals. And the questions about environmental impact will become only more important. Governments will continue to pass the buck. Brands will find themselves far less able to. Once this was pressure about transparent supply chains, child labour, workshop conditions. That hasn't gone away, but now environmental impact and sustainable is part of that. I would expect more fashion brands to publicly renounce fur, but also there'll be more emphasis on the pollution of plastics, so don't expect fake fur to be a replacement. And in addition to that, there will be a growing anxiety about fast fashion, which is a trend that may help luxury brands with more focus on quality and special pieces. Which leads me to the next trend, the other taboos of the world. Many years ago in 1843, we ran an article asking, asking the question, what currently accepted norms may one day appall our grandchildren? What, in other words, are the taboos of the future? One of those was eating meat, and we're nearly there. Veganism is already a raging trend. Sales of vegan food are surging fast, even though the number of people who actually call themselves vegan is increasing far more slowly. It used to be that you were veggie or that you ate meat. Now that feels a bit like saying that if you eat one bad thing when you're on a diet, you might as well go the whole hog and have a Mars bar. So our food choices, to borrow a term from a different era, from a different arena, are non-binary. There's a growing sense of the need for moderation. More and more people are opting to eat less meat, to eat good meat when they do so, good meat in quotes there, and trying out different meat substitutes. And I would expect this to gain critical mass in 2020. We've seen a UK burger chain selling plant-based patties that are actually imported from the US. You'll note the food miles there, not particularly brilliant for the environment. However, in 2020, we could see the volume of demand in the UK and elsewhere being large enough that actually this is no longer such a niche and it becomes critical mass. Which brings me to trends 9 and 10, which are related. And these are about the demographic groups that matter in political terms and in consumption terms. First one you're familiar with, we'll continue to chase millennials, whether that's in our choice of Olympic sport, political campaigns or brands, and expect ever more studies about what millennials want and what Generation Z, the younger lot, want. Trend 10, my final one, is the rise of a less talked about demographic, the young old. The peak of the baby boom in the developed world was 1955 to 1960, which means that the 2020s will be peak retirement years for baby boomers. In addition to that, in China, where for many the retirement age is 50, those born in the decade before the one-child policy was introduced are also now starting to retire. So as well as millennials, we'll have to think increasingly about the young old, which is a Japanese term. They will be more active, healthier and richer than their predecessors, and there will be far more of them. They will disrupt all sorts of markets, not least the luxury ones. And that, I think, is my wrap of what to look out for in the next year. I wish you the best of luck in navigating the twists and turns, the ups and downs, and the unexpected turns of 2020. Thank you.
Rose, we've got a minute or two for questions. Anybody got any questions for Rose? We have a minute or two. Yes, please. There's one question up there. Somebody send a mic that way. Thank you. Thanks, Rose.
Hi, really enjoyed that. I was wondering, you said you predicted some things for 2019 and you got some of them right, some of them wrong. Can you tell us which ones you got right?
Well, now that's a good question. Should have brought my 2019 notes. I was a bit sneaky in 2019 because some of the things I predicted were definitely on the political calendar, like Indian elections, etc. What you tend to find when you get things wrong is that massive things happen that you just never thought were going to. So, for example, even 2 weeks ago when I was thinking about this, coronavirus wasn't on my list for 2020, and now suddenly it's here. So usually the unexpected things are the ones that you had absolutely no idea. So we probably all know it's probably pretty safe for me to be predicting this year that the US election and the continued rule of Trump, whatever happens in November, will lead to unexpected things. But, you know, I'm afraid I'm probably less canny about predicting the black swans, the unexpected ones.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Rosie. It's been fun. Thank you.